Redditors who were poor as kids, what things were normal to you when you were poor growing up. Story 1. I got my first summer job when I was 12 or so, and any time I managed to build up a nice chunk of change my mom would borrow the money. She always paid it back, I think, but it wasn't an option, she just took it when needed. Story 2. I grew up in Serbia in the 90s, very poor when hyperinflation hit, eating a bread and sugar sandwich, only being able to afford milk for my little brother, 1 glass per day, my dad giving me enough money so I could go to the store to buy a single banana, bread loaf literally costing 2 cents, wearing the same clothes for a week straight, taking a shower once a week and having to boil your water in a large pot, sharing a school bag with my sister. Our house had nylon and duct tape wear. Some windows were supposed to be, this especially sucked during storms, planting and harvesting our own vegetables, sealing some house cracks with mud, walking everywhere and asking for rides because we didn't own a car, firewood, and only one room of the house having heat. Coca-Cola was a luxury. If I saw someone drinking Coke, I thought they were rich. You'll add more when I remember more. Being poor sucked, and so did the Yugoslavian civil wars. In relation to the hyperinflation, my dad always says you'd get your paycheck and by the time you arrived home it was worth half. Story 3. Fast food being a massive treat. Intense anxiety whenever school would force us to buy things, like class t-shirts or field trip admission costs, even if it was 6. Story 4. Buying the absolute cheapest item there was of something. Wearing shoes with holes in them constantly, dressing super weird because everything was handed down to you. Story 5. That you didn't get clothing or shoes that you didn't absolutely need. It's foreign to me to this day to buy a piece of clothing I don't require, but just want. Story 6. The first time I remember consciously realizing that we were poor was when I was 6 and went to the doctor because an eye infection had turned into sepsis. When asked who our family doctor was, and I had to reply the emergency room. The reason the question was asked was because the PA at the ER a week earlier had misdiagnosed it as pink eye and sent us home saying everything would get better in a week or so. Actually, I had an infected cut on my cornea and it was spreading into my eye socket and bloodstream. The doctor was incredulous that nobody had even actually looked at the eye yet, as within half a second of using that eye light scope thingy doctors used to look in eyes and ears showed him what was wrong. I mean, I knew we didn't have much money a good while before that, but that was the first time I realized just how crippling poverty really is. That because my parents didn't have enough green paper slips in a bank that I might lose my eye, and that the lack of those little green slips was going to have a long-term negative impact on my future. Story 7. Actual food stamps that looked like postage stamps. I thought that was how everyone bought food. Also, stocking up on V05 shampoo like we were preppers. It apparently goes on sale once a year. Story 8. Still being very hungry after lunchtime in school. I remember having some pretzels and a small sandwich while the other kids had Lunchables and cookies and all that junk. I also was recently reminiscing with a childhood friend of mine, and I mentioned how I miss my old house, and she said I don't. Your house was kinda dumpy. I took that like a dagger. Story 9. When my parents made rice for dinner, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back on it, I now realize when I ate a bowl of rice with butter, things were tight for my parents. I didn't think twice about it. We are all doing okay now. Story 10. Powdered milk, no AC. My parents sometimes skipped meals so us kids could eat. Clothes were hand-me-downs or from Walmart, and only for school starting. No wastefulness, rarely eat out, no name brands, antenna TV, no cable, no health insurance, no dentist visits. I started working and buying my own clothes at age 14. Our home was falling apart around us. My dad tried to keep it together. Sort of, and my parents never being home because they each worked multiple jobs. I could go on. Story 11. Blocking off whole sections of the house in winter to save money by heating only 1 or 2 rooms, heating water on the stove so you could bathe with hot water, buying marked down meat that was graying or slightly green in spots, burn scars on the back of my legs for trying to stand too close to the kerosene heater in the winter. Paper food stamps. My mom sending me to the neighbors' houses to ask to borrow things like dish soap. Story 12. We were homeless for 6 months. Luckily we had a camper to stay in at a campground, but we made do. There was a basketball court, a pond, and a loft of rich kids. Kinda made me feel like when these kids had like a second home that they go to a month out of the year. And I'm in a camper with my cokehead mom, alcoholic stepdad, and brother that's now on the run with 3 warrants. I guess I'm the only one that's somewhat normal. Oh, we never really had food either. Afterwards we moved into low-income housing and would lose power all the time because they'd rather get up than pay bills. I came home from school to see my TV, my PS2 games gone. They pawned them to pay rent. I was working SD the time and I had to pay to get it back. I hated it. I had a girlfriend and would always go to her house, basically came home to sleep and that's it. I'd try to stay out of the house as much as possible. And was super embarrassed when I'd have to tell her that I had no power, or food in the fridge or a phone. But now I work my wife as well, and we get done. We're not rich but we're comfortable and we have the things we want, and are thankful for every bit of it because she came up the same way. Story 13. My mom smiling and telling us everything's fine and then sneaking off to the bathroom or her bedroom to cry because we'd ask her insensitive questions relating to our financial situation. Story 14. A single kerosene heater that would stink smoke the whole house out on the few nights a year we could afford to run it. Sleeping on the bathroom floor in summer because it was too dangerous to sleep on the balcony. Bologna and tomato sauce sandwiches 3 times a day. 1 pair of hand-me-down shoes that I was never allowed wear unless it was a special occasion. The only item in our house that used electricity was the clock radio in my parents' bedroom, and it only got turned on when they went to bed. Christmas consisted of receiving the clothes and school supplies for the next year. All your friends at school aren't hungry and share their lunch with you, and you never work out why. You discover chocolate milk and it literally blows your mind. McDonald's comes to town, and 3 years later a friend's dad is driving a bunch of kids home from the game and asks you what you want, and you say nothing, thanks, because you know better than to ask for anything, and because you have literally no idea what they actually sell there. Entire weekend spent wandering around town looking for coins so that you can get 50 cents worth of mixed lollies. Regular visits from the government lady who asks you a bunch of weird questions. Mom crying all the time. You get 10 from somewhere and it never even occurs to you to spend it. You give it to your parents. You never ever want for anything, because there is no point. Story 15. Really bad home haircuts. I didn't have my hair cut at an actual place until I became an adult, turning down a side road when a police car was nearby because our tags were out, watching other kids getting to go on all the field trips and not getting to go watch the talent shows and plays at school that cost $1 to get into. I sat in that empty classroom a lot, having to announce every morning in roll call that I'd take the free lunch tray that day, thanks, never having snacks at snack time, wearing donated clothes, and having another kid announce that the shirt I was wearing used to be hers. A kid dropped a dime on the floor of the cafeteria and made me pick it up because I needed it and she didn't, just constantly bullying about my clothes and house. Story 16. The police would come into our neighborhood, fill up the block with their cars, open their trunks full of toys and give them out to all the kids. Realized after we moved that I stopped seeing this phenomenon, and I asked my mom why they didn't do it in our new neighborhood. Just straight up, oh yeah, it was a sort of charity thing because we were poor and our neighbors were poor. Everyone there was just poor. Story 17. Knowing what we would have for lunches and dinners 100 of the time because it was always the same, being extra careful with consumables because if you were wasteful your parents would get really angry, or worse, just start crying. Going to visit grandparents and all their church friends would overload us with toys and clothes, all of which were old, outdated, and smelled funny, but we took home anyways. Story 18. Old mildewed towels. When I finally came into more money, it was such a foreign concept to actually replace towels more than once every 6 to 8 years. Same with bedding. It had never even crossed my mind that if your pillow starts getting gross you should replace it instead of just dealing with it. Watered down hand soap, shampoo, conditioner, glass cleaner, etc. Lots of dinners involving ingredients like ramen noodle packages. We had a very bland stir-fry that just used a pound of ground beef, a pack of ramen and frozen stir-fry veggies with some seasonings. It was enough for the 4 of us. Campbell's soup was awesome. Most people hate how salty it is, but I grew up on that and still love it, using things long after they had worn out. The thing that sticks out most to me is hairbrushes. They could be missing half the bristles, but it didn't cross anyone's mind to replace it because it still barely performed its intended function. Toys were also used long after they wore out or broke. I suspect my siblings and I were also especially hard on toys. We were smart kids and often found creative and unconventional uses for toys when playing, but it was probably also because a lot of our toys came from thrift stores. The only reason we had a computer was because my mom's father gave us his old one free of charge. We were part of some technology test group and actually got to be early adopters of the internet and got web service in 1996. Without that test group though, how long it would have been. We were watching and buying VHS tapes long after DVD became a thing. I think the last VHS we bought brand new was Madagascar 2005. We had to really like a movie before my parents would buy it. We mostly just checked them out from the library, which meant not getting to watch new releases. Wearing clothes long after we had outgrown them was kinda standard for a few years when we didn't have the luxury of hand-me-downs from my older cousins. One day my mom was yelling about something money-related and told me and my siblings that we were always dressed like little refugee children. I'm not sure if she was mad at us or the situation. I dress really nice, usually overdressed these days, and it is because of comments like that. Not taking very long road trips at all because we didn't know if the car would break down or not. A 3-hour trip was a huge deal. No video games or cable TV. I have gotten flack for this one from other people in similar situations saying they were dirt poor and still had cable. My parents just didn't see a need to spend money on cable when they were tight on money. It was PBS all day every day for us if we wanted TV. My kindergarten friends had Pokemon Red and Blue on their Game Boys. I was very sad that I couldn't have Pokemon. Christmas was a huge deal. My parents worked amazingly hard to get us cool stuff for Christmas, so it was kinda that one day we got a taste of a more luxurious situation. On my second or third Christmas I got a shitton of Fisher-Price Little People play sets. Nowadays I'm making very good money in a comfortable job and I have all the tech and clothing I could want. I collect old video games as a sort of way to make up for lost time. My first ever video game was a cocktail table Space Raiders game at some arcade thing when my grandparents hosted a family reunion at a dude ranch. I was 5 and totally fell in love with the entire concept of video games. My parents felt bad about having to tell me I couldn't have a Game Boy or SNES and 64. It means so much that I now have the luxury of playing all the games I didn't get to enjoy as a kid. It makes me so happy in a way I can't really describe that I can finally make this dream come true for myself. Anyway, I sorta started rambling, but it's really cool to see how far I've come. Thanks OP. Story 19. Not eating out. Except for birthdays. Fast food and takeout wasn't really a thing in my life until I moved out and had my own income. Everything was homemade. Pizza delivery was a big deal. never buying name-brand foods. You learn what off-brands taste the exact same and buy those when you're lucky enough to pick out some snacks, but literally all food was and household products for that matter were off-brand, finding ways to save money, whether it be by coupons or buying school clothes from eBay and secondhand stores. Grew up in a tourist town and both parents worked for attractions. We got to do a lot of cool stuff only because my parents would save the employee tickets they would get in paychecks and trade with other attractions and sites and stuff. I'm an adult now and it's still hard for me to spend money on things I don't find absolutely necessary. Even though I have the money to buy things I want, it's taught me to prioritize money and be grateful, and take good care of what I have. Story 20 hand-me-downs from literally everyone, then mom sewing and hemming to make them sort of fit. I don't really remember shopping for clothes until I graduated high school. Story 21 using the neighbor's hose when they weren't home to fill buckets to flush the toilet. Our power usually stayed on. My mom worried the neighbors would call CPS if the lights were off, so they let other utilities go first. Like others here no cheat or much food. Every winter I hoped for snow so my dad could make snow cream. Fresh snow, sugar and milk. Such a treat as a kid. Story 22 dish soap being used for everything, laundry, bath, dishes, floor cleaner, whatever. I guess a little bit went a long way but I hated it. Why buy facial soap and moisturizer when there is perfectly good dish soap? My skin still sucks I think from not getting properly cared for growing up. Wiping with fast food napkins because there was no toilet paper, going to the nurse at school every day during my period to ask for a tampon or pad. This was for me for years until I could get a job. When my mom wouldn't buy me clothes or shoes for middle school, I had to duct tape my shoes. I rocked it like a fashion piece but really I couldn't get my shoes to stay together. Pretty normal poor kid stuff. I will say that as an adult I have never once ran out of toilet paper or laundry face soap. I usually keep a backup compulsively of all soaps and I have a large bin of tampons been trying out a Diva cup too. I have zero gold jewelry but I am set for the next few years worth of periods. Story 23 not needing much, and then thrift store shopping when we did need. A couple times a year we would go visit family in bigger cities and be so excited to hit up the nicer thrift stores because that's where the rich people donated their clothes. I still shop at thrift stores for a lot of things. Story 24 being the only kid who didn't have a snack during snack time in elementary school. The teachers kept a little snack jar for me and a few other kids, but I never took any because I felt bad. Story 25 when I was a kid, I was bought a high-end name brand layer of jeans for Christmas by rich relatives. Everyone at school was jealous. I didn't even know the brand, because we never had brand name anything. Jeans were just whatever fit that I could find at the thrift store. I was an only child till I was 11, so I didn't have anyone to get hand-me-downs from. Story 26 sharing a room and bathroom with my dad and sister. We spent a little over a year in this arrangement, had just a little 14-inch TV, bunk beds on the side of the room and a queen bed in the middle with one big dresser and a couple tubs we used for clothes. I really thought it was fun all the time I got to spend around my dad. Wasn't necessarily poor my entire childhood, but looking back I know this was taxing for a father to take on by himself. Now he's living it up. 15-10 good dad. Anyone have to share a room with siblings and or parents? Story 27 it was about 2008 when me and my brothers moved in with my mom. She managed to get a tiny apartment for all four of us. Tiny kitchen, small bathrooms. We were grateful that we had our own place. The apartment didn't have cable, or at least we didn't, so when my brothers and I had to get up for school, my mom would plug in an old radio and turn it to the Donnie Simpson show at 7 a.m. in the morning. It gave us our daily news and weather updates, music and everything we needed to know, just like a regular news station on TV would. Cut to 2010, and my mom finally got a better job, so she was able to pay for cable. We had gotten so used to the radio that even though we had the ability to watch the news, we still wanted to hear the radio. Story 28 being hungry all the time, looking forward to free school lunches, government cheese and honey, thinking that McDonald's was a treat. Most of my memories of that time revolve around food or the lack of it. When we were poor, my mom made a lot of ham hock beans. When we were really poor, she saved the ham hock for the next batch. The house we lived in at that time was poorly insulated and was in a brutally cold climate. The wood stove could only keep up with the living room. During the winter, if it was below freezing, the whole family slept in the living room. This was in Kansas in the late 70s and early 80s. My stepdad bought dog food in bulk because it was cheaper without the bag. Stepdad went on the run from the police. Growing weed in the corn IRC, my mom gave up and moved us all to California where her parents lived. Early December, one woman, 4 kids, and a dog in a 74 Corolla wagon with everything we owned on the roof or in a one-wheeled Sears Allstate trailer from approximate 1942. It had a caster-type wheel with 2 hitches. It pulled the bumper off in the middle of the night in Hays, Kansas. My mom begged a welding shop to fix it for $10. They did it for free. I was 11 and had to troubleshoot and de-ice the carburetor climbing through the Rockies. After many adventures involving a puppy on the road for a week, we arrived at my grandparents'. Grandpa said it looked like the grapes of wrath. Story 29 layaway at Walmart for big spending times of year, like for back-to-school clothes. No way could my parents afford to cloth 3 growing children in one shopping trip. Story 30 going to hilariously underfunded and shitty schools, worst elementary school in the province represent. And all the issues that came with that. For example, I went to schools in the mid-2000s that didn't have computers for students and teachers often wouldn't stick around for the entire year. It wasn't until I started using Reddit when I found out that people who don't go to shitty schools had teachers who pushed them into post-secondary, whereas my teachers seemed to have given up on us and would actively discourage us from going into post-secondary. Story 31. Oyster crackers were a delicacy. You'd only rarely get them in the mission food boxes around where I lived, and when you did, everyone was fighting over them. Finally, something other than powdered milk, generic wheat cereal, oatmeal, and dry beans. Story 32b. For shrimp ramen, ravioli, powdered mac and cheese mix, and TV dinners. You know the ones, to this day I cannot eat those, they make me sick. Story 33. Comfort food is still ramen noodles with an egg in it. No AC, odd things I figured out when I was older. I didn't realize you could buy milk at the grocery store. Milk came from the farmer once a week and you had to go get it. For some reason I thought white bread was something you only got in restaurants. I was an adult before I figured out my mom could buy more wheat bread on food stamps. Veggies came from grandpa's garden, because I'm old government cheese. Story 34. Family dumpster diving trips. They were exciting. Except one time my mom's husband tricked a woman in the rich neighborhood into driving off to help us find something, and instead we stole her garbage. Even kid me thought that was weird. Story 35. You have to shut the door very quickly behind you. My parents couldn't afford to heat the whole neighborhood. I should be thankful for what I have because when my parents were children they didn't even have a pot to in and used catalogs to wipe there. Story 36. People used to drop off bags of clothing they no longer wanted or no longer fit their kids to see if we could use the items. We were the drop-off on the way to the thrift shop. If there were still items that we weren't able to use after going through the bags, my parents would drop the remaining items at the thrift shop. Story 37. Being super thankful for anything and everything. Both parents worked crazy hours, so instead of getting an absurd amount of toys for Christmas just being psyched I got to spend all day with them, my dad saved up every year and bought a huge Lego set and would build and play. That was cooler than anything year-round. Story 38. Having to scrounge up firewood every time we ran out of heating oil or firewood we had bought, using powdered milk a lot, or severely watered-down milk to the point it was lighter than skim milk, never having money for anything at school, missed a couple of good field trips due to it. Story 39. Big meals made of cheap pasta and meat, baked ziti, mac and cheese, etc., that were made on Sunday, portioned up, and eaten for the rest of the week. Hated it growing up, but when I realized, we never went hungry because of it. I often will mention to my mom divorce with little child support paid how grateful I am to have learned the best lesson in life. As long as you are alive, you can succeed, and food is a requirement to stay alive. Story 40. Growing up knowing which soup kitchens around town served what meals and when, and supplementing what little food we had with that in food bank trips, or always being a generation or two behind all my friends console-wise we had to wait until we could find games and console secondhand, or as my mom calls it, the get in place. Story 41. I never bought new shoes until the soles were literally coming off from them. There's even be a short period of time where the shoe would have mouth where the sole is coming off from the front, still carries over into my adulthood. My wife constantly tells me I need to buy new shoes and I constantly reply these shoes work just fine, they're borderline in tatters. Story 42. Birthday Christmas present IOUs. How checks worked. You don't need money in the bank at the time to write one. Government cheese, said previously in this thread but I included it because I love it. Am I the only one? Shout out to Hoop Cheese. Grab the pliers for the channel, fix the hanger on the TV. Ghostface. My house hand-me-downs not from family, but from wealthier friends, for extra embarrassment, waiting for my mom to get home from work. Story 43. Running water was for yuppies. A cut piece of a 24 board is a plate. We have one burning stove for heat in a drafty house that you and your brother need to walk through snow for to get firewood. A ramen soup, PBJ sandwich and a Pepsi is a full meal. Story 44. I am still poor, and living with a 6-member family in a very small house. I am the youngest, and the oldest is 23. Things that I consider normal. My mom constantly making homemade stuff. i.e. shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste, makeup remover etc. Anything $6 and up is expensive. Ask for only one thing for Christmas, but if you don't, expect only one. Never ever waste food. You're gonna get booted out of the bathroom no matter what you think. We only have one because she's older is something I hear a lot. Basically, I don't get most things because I wasn't born first. My siblings are always stealing and using my shower towels. Food hoarding is very common. I never let any friends over. If you're gonna use the washer, do it only when you have a full load. Mold, age-old phones, lots of free trial canceling. What even is a shopping spree? Daily online window shopping. Can't keep up with fashion trends but we somehow make it work. Holes in walls, unfinished rooms. Talking drywall. My brother lives in a trailer in our yard. I share a room with my sister. My mom and dad once had to sleep on an air mattress in the living room for 3 years. I've got a lot more where that came from but I'll end this here. Story 45. It's a small thing but it's a never-ending debate between my husband and me. Tomato soup. Hell, only have it mixed with milk. Most people I meet say it should be mixed with milk. I say that's disgusting and it should only be mixed with water. Growing up hella poor with a single working mom, we couldn't afford to frivolously use milk, so tomato soup was made with water, which tastes 1000x better than if you use milk anyway. Story 46. Large grocery trips at Walmart once a month. After food stamps came Christmas and birthday presents all in one black trash bag because wrapping paper was too expensive. Story 47. My parents bringing home large trash bags of clothes from who knows where and everyone going through them looking for whatever fit them. I got new school clothes, parents and grandma got some new stuff, having a bar of soap on the bathroom sink instead of liquid antibacterial hand soap. Half of our living room ceiling didn't actually have a ceiling, it was just wooden joists, didn't have enough money to fix it. One day the upstairs floor broke and drywall fell off the ceiling. Dad put a big plank up in the middle of the dining room to hold the floor up so we could still walk upstairs.
I got splinter in my feet from walking on my floor without shoes.
Story 48. I would not eat for several days. Then my dog, cat, lizard, chicken would go missing and we would have stir-fry or stew. No, I am not Asian. This was a horrible part of my life. Please be kind. This happened a half dozen or so times by the time I was old enough to notice. Story 49. Going on fun shopping trips with aunts and uncles to buy new clothes. I thought it was just a fun family bonding thing, but really my parents couldn't afford to get us clothes, so the rest of the extended family helped out. Big respect for all of my family. Story 50. Ketchup and bread for a lot of meals. Hamburger helper without the added meat for a lot more. Used clothes from cousins and from a crisis center, which I think is meant for donating clothing to people whose houses have burned down. Fishing with worms we had to find ourselves. Story 51. I was about 14 when I first realized that life I was forced to live wasn't normal. If your family was poor, and they couldn't afford to feed all of you, they will show their favorite child. At least my father did. And once that happened, I never really bounced back from it. Once he knew that I had seen who he cared for most, he just gave up trying to make it seem fair. Often there were nights where I was locked in my room so I wasn't tempted to take anything before them, and I could always smell the food my father managed to buy to feed himself and my brother, and it made my stomach feel like it was just going to collapse on itself. My brother is and has always been an overweight boy. I was 6 when we first became homeless and extremely poor. It went on for 8 years. For 8 years I would be starved, disregarded and forced to live for them if I wanted food. One night it got so bad that my father sent my brother to a friend's house, got himself drunk and took me for a ride. That night I almost died at least 6 or 7 times. My father lost control of the car many times at high speeds and almost crashed into a tree every time. I remember most of everything from that night to this day. My father and I are the only ones who know what happened that night. I dream about this at least once a week. I'm 17 and live somewhere else, but being so young and have this happen to you takes its toll. I don't think I'll ever feel painless and happy like before, when the world was amazing and nothing could go wrong. Most people apart from certain family don't know about any of this and think I'm a cheerful person. My father became poor and did everything he could to keep my brother alive. It got so bad at one point for him that he let his favorite child stay safe and he took me with him on his attempted suicide. Being poor doesn't always mean you can't afford nice things or go without toys. It also drives someone's mind to act differently. Being poor can drive someone to do horrible things to a young child. Being poor can make you want to end it all. If you've ever been in a situation anything like mine, my heart goes out to you. You are an extremely strong person and you should be proud that you were strong enough to endure what you have. Recently I've had trouble to stay strong. I've wanted it all to be over, but I've made it this far, and that's what keeps me going. Stay strong for me and anyone out there who truly loves you. Pay attention and you'll see the difference. Story 52. 8+ people in a 1-bedroom apartment. I lived in an apartment complex of new immigrants, grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, and kids under one roof. I just thought it was cool that I had a lot of kids my age to hang with. Story 53. The cold water handle in our only bathroom sink broke when I was in high school and we just left it that way for years. We would wash our hands very quickly and I got used to the feeling of the scalding heat if the sink had been used frequently that day. My hands in high school looked very old and wrinkly because of it. They've mostly recovered now, thankfully, but it was pretty mind-blowing when I realized some people just fix things immediately when they break. Story 54. Getting little jobs from the age of 8 up, shoveling snow, mowing lawns, raking leaves, pet sotting, eventually babysitting, cleaning people's houses, but no way in were we going to take money from the little old lady in the hood to help her out. We did that stuff for free, helping in gardens and doing farm work. All that money going to help your family make ends meet. Praying that we didn't have another snow day because the only way we got 3 meals a day was if school was in session and we ate free breakfast and lunch. Watered down Kool-Aid. Yes, watered down because sugar was expensive. And it was Flavor Aid. Being embarrassed you couldn't bring in an item required for school. One year I had a teacher take points off Everett's because I didn't bring in 3 boxes of Kleenex in for the classroom when it was start of the year. Like I literally cannot afford the extra 5 to bring them in lady. Let alone that our parents have 5 kids and all the teachers are expecting them. Never going to birthday parties because we couldn't afford it, or get a ride to the party. Learning how to take care of children very early because your parents couldn't afford a babysitter, so the older kids were free babysitters. But on the upside it made you a great babysitter for others and you could start babysitting at like 11 years old, 10 if it were only for a few hours. I also had no problems taking care of my own kid when I had one. I already dealt with anything he could throw at me. At 13 he's still the easiest child I've ever cared for. Something I loved was swimming in the creek instead of the city pool that cost money, fishing with my siblings, camping out our friends' ponds and their acreage. Camping is cheap if you basically live that way already. Bread and air sandwich was my favorite. Endless watered-down soups and stews, powdered milk. Learn how to budget, grocery shop, and cook from an early age. It's easy to handle those tasks now I'm in my own home and started a family. Us older two kids did everything we could to make sure our younger three siblings could have a lot easier life than us, and they did. We made sure they had more than us, didn't have to work the way we were, and that they just got to worry about kid stuff, not the grown-up stuff. They turned out to be wonderful and amazing people who work very hard to give to others. I'm so proud of them and would gladly raise them again because it made them who they are today. Poverty can bring out the worst in people, and it's something that my mother lived by. She would often squander the money from the family on BS for herself while my dad was busying his, but to pay the but every week it was the same. It got way better after they got a divorce, but I still be need up raising my siblings. Story 55, going to Money Tree Payday Loan Place. For any who don't know, how far out of Washington state they are with my mom. I was too young to understand fully what we were doing there at first, but as I got older I figured it out. I'm not ashamed of her or anything. She was a single mom going to college and raising a son who was not easy to raise, I'll be the first to admit. But yeah, I just thought having to get advances on your paycheck every month almost was normal. A week ago I just had to take out the first payday loan I've ever taken out to turn my lights back on. It was really shitty and gave me flashbacks to those days. Also, there was one time where it was my mom's birthday, which is in February, and the power had been cut off. She made the payment late, but they wouldn't be able to turn it back on until the day. We lived in Tacoma at the time, so it was pretty cold and a wet cold. She bought a deli-made roast chicken and a round cake from Safeway to still celebrate somewhat. We piled all of the blankets, sheets and clothing in the house on her bed after putting on several layers each, and got under it all and ate roast chicken and cake together while she read Harry Potter to me by candlelight. Strangely one of my favorite memories. Probably because it was a very close feeling in spite of how shitty the situation was. It's one of her worst because she was so down on her luck and out of options at that point, and it was her birthday of all days.